So, in my scheme, I've taken you through Wednesday. So I get up on Thursday morning and now my brain is just churning. Because now I'm thinking I'm getting somewhere. And I'm figuring, when I say that, I don't want you to think that I'm sitting back going, oh, I'm so smart. I'm thinking God is helping me. I'm seeing things that I've never seen. I think I'm understanding things, but I'm not there yet. That's how my mind is working. So now I'm beginning to look at the text differently. I'm now not focusing on the obvious part, and I'm focusing on the parts that I've never thought about. And I get to verse 25 through 27. Why does Luke have Jesus giving examples of two people who were healed, one by Elijah, one by Elisha? Those verses do not appear in Matthew or Mark, and I'm finding myself going, all right, why does Luke include this when these other gospel writers don't? And of course, my thought is not that Luke is making it up. So I immediately think, why is Jesus doing that? Why does he do that? In verses 25 through 27, it's not in your notes because I didn't want to include it. I wanted you to listen to me tell you. In verses 25 through 27, Jesus says, don't you know that Elijah, and I'm not quoting it, I'm just giving you my paraphrase. Jesus says to the people in Nazareth, who he's already said, you're going to ask of me, why don't you do the things here that you did in Capernaum? Now, what does that sound like? It's complaining. Why are you treating us so beggarly, Jesus? Why aren't you doing the great works here? And then Jesus says, when Elijah came, he fed the widow during the drought. He kept her oil and meal full until the drought was over. And in the time of Elisha, he healed a leper. There are a bunch of lepers in Judea, but he only healed one man. So I'm reading those verses and I'm thinking, okay, why is Jesus saying that? What's he saying? What's he getting at? How come Luke has this when Matthew and Mark don't? I mean, in Luke, Jesus is scolding the people in Nazareth. You don't get that in Matthew and Mark. But in Luke, Jesus is in their face. He's scolding them using these examples. So I always thought, well, the people just don't like Jesus. Now I'm starting to see, no, there's more going on here than they just don't like him. There's something deeper going on. And now I'm seeing that he's scolding them. And where's he scolding them, by the way? Where are they physically? They're in the stinking synagogue. He's berating them in the, quote, house of God. He's just read from the scroll, and he's just poking them in the eye. So he's scolding them in their own synagogue, and then I'm thinking, well, no wonder they want to throw him off the cliff. He's in their face. Both of these examples from the Old Testament, the woman that Elijah helped and the man that Elisha helped, both of them were Gentiles. Jesus is telling the people of Nazareth who are complaining, why don't you do here what he's saying? Do you know when Elijah came, he helped a woman with meal? She was a Phoenician woman. She was not an Israelite. And when Elisha went and healed the leper, he was not an Israelite. He was he was a Syrian. Reproduced my thinking. All right, so it came to me that they're not Israelites. But then to make sure that I was on track, I looked up Ben Witherington. I can't remember which scholar, but I looked to make sure I wasn't in left field, and they were making this same point, that Jesus is particularly saying to the people of Nazareth that God ministered to Gentiles, not all the time Jews, right? And what does that tell you? He's saying to the people of Nazareth.
Nazarenes.
He's basically saying, look, I didn't come for Nazareth. I didn't come for just Israel. I came for a bigger reason. That's what he's saying to them. Now, and if you think about it, Luke, none of these guys record every last thing Jesus says. They tell us a synopsis of the account. Otherwise, our gospels would be long. No one would, you know what I mean? Like John says, if all the things Jesus said and did were written down, all the books in the world wouldn't contain it. And so in my mind, I'm thinking that Jesus is making it very clear to the people of Nazareth, what I'm telling you. I think that that's happening. Now, I immediately, when it dawns on me that Jesus uses two examples from the Old Testament of God ministering to Gentiles, I immediately think, it's the meta message of Luke. How many of you have ever heard anybody tell you about meta message?
Meta narrative, same thing.
Same thing. When you're reading a New Testament document, especially New Testament, you need to know what the author's meta message is. What is the overarching reason that Paul is writing to the Corinthians? What's the overarching reason that Luke is even writing a gospel? He has them in front of him that are already written. Why does he need to write another one? He has a reason. And if you can learn what the meta message of the document is, then you use that lens for every passage that you're questioning. What's the meta message of the author? Because that's going to help you. And so that's what happened to me on Thursday morning. I went, because I'd already told the church, Luke is a Gentile. He's the only Gentile writer in the New Testament. And he's not just a Gentile, he's a Roman. He is a Roman. Who are the Romans? They're the occupiers of Palestine. They hate them. The Jews hate the Romans. They hate the Romans about as much as they hated the Samaritans. So Luke is a Gentile. His meta message is, I got to get intense. Luke has written his gospel, and he's writing to a Roman official, Theophilus. And his intention is to say, Jesus is not against Rome. He's not against the Romans. Like the Pharisees and like the Zealots. Jesus came for a completely different reason. Listen to me. He came for Romans. Now we know what he means is he came for Gentiles. He came for everybody. But that's the meta message that Luke gives us. And so I believe what's happening here is Luke is presenting a story that Matthew and Mark don't include. And now the question becomes, why didn't Matthew include that? Did they not know about it? Luke's not an eyewitness. Matthew was probably sitting right there. So why didn't Matthew write that story? Who was it that said Matthew wrote for the Jews? Okay. I was taught that as a young man. And I corrected you because I don't believe that's true anymore. Matthew was a Jew and he's writing from a Jewish perspective.
Right.
But he's not writing it, I want the Jews to get this. It's because, and so his prejudices come out in his writing. Oh, wow, how can you say that? Matthew's the Word of God. Yeah, but Matthew was a man just like us. We lose that. Who was it that said that to me? Was it you? Somebody said that to me. Maybe it was Alan, I don't remember. But that my presentation of how the New Testament came together illustrates that men were involved, humans were involved. And I made the point that God uses us in all of our fallenness. That's the glory of God, that he takes sinners and idiots like me and he actually uses me. And when I walk away, I'm like, God, I can't believe it, God. I'm so amazed that you use me. And we all feel that way. That's the glory of God. Yeah. And so Matthew, the question becomes, why didn't Matthew put it in there? Because it looks bad for Jews. That's probably why. If he's writing it from a Jewish perspective. Luke is not. He's a Roman. It's exceedingly important to Luke. If you think about it, Luke is following Paul. Paul ends up being arrested and sent to Rome to be judged by Caesar, and Paul ends up being executed by Rome. And Luke is saying Jesus is not against the Romans. You watch The Chosen, and that's a constant theme. is we hate the Romans, they're occupiers. We want the Messiah to throw them out. And John the Baptist is from the Qumran community where the Zealots originate. He's got the war scrolls. The war scrolls are all about fighting and throwing Rome out. Jesus is not about that at all. He never says anything bad about the Romans. Everything, in fact, a lot of what he does is positive.
Gentile, and it seems that his gospel is geared toward a Gentile audience, right?
Well, no, it doesn't seem it. It's clear.
Okay.
He's writing to oath, you most excellent Theophilus.
Okay, point well taken. All right, so, and is that the primary
It
reason?
wasn't clear to me until I got into the text and read from another scholar that the phrase, when Luke says most excellent Theophilus, that is a way of addressing a Roman official. I never knew that. Why didn't I ever know that? Why didn't anyone tell me that? I've always heard Theophilus. Theophilus is lover of God. You know, well, that's what his name translates, but it's highly likely that Theophilus is his Christian name. That he actually was Marcus or something.
All right. Well, you said you were taught that Matthew's gospel was geared toward Jewish. I'm going to say Jewish background believers.
No.
No. You said you were taught that when you were young.
Oh, I was taught that. Yes.
So, but you don't necessarily think that now. And so why? You didn't
rather argue from not what it's not, but what it is. And what it is Matthew is a Jew, and he's writing from a Jewish perspective. He can't help himself.
Yeah. But
Luke is not a Jew, therefore he's not.
I understand that. So the point is, you're saying that we don't really know Matthew's intended original audience. Right.
Because just as
Well, no, he is writing. He's writing for Jews, but it's not because he sat down and thought, "I'm going to write a gospel that'll reach the Jews." He's not thinking that. I am a Jew. It's all subconscious.
Yeah, I know. But with Luke, he is doing that. He is conscious that his audience.
Yes,
is
he is,
Gentile.
because he's the Jewish
He's the minority.
Exactly. In the Jewish mindset, he's the enemy.
But in Matthew's mind, as a Jew writing his gospel, maybe his default would be the Jewish background church, right? The whole thing. Paul comes to from Antioch to Jerusalem because agitators have come down, right? So the church in its original early state is a Jewish sect almost, right? So wouldn't that be so naturally Matthew's mind and default curse of knowledge is that his audience is a Jewish background audience.
Yes, but what I'm saying is he doesn't sit down and say, "I'm going to write a gospel for the Jews."
No,
he doesn't think that any more than I'm thinking in doing this presentation. I'm going to do a presentation for Americans. No,
Right.
I'm not. I'd love for Indians and Asians to watch it, but I'm an American, and you're all Americans, and so I can't help it. It's just by default what Matthew.
Matthew's a little bit of Matthew's bias toward Gentiles. My lean would be more like it just doesn't seem to be helpful to potential audiences, maybe like his default audience in his own head, to include that.
That's exactly what.
And part of it may be more that Luke is being real intentional to include the Gentile.
That's
part.
exactly
so
what.
It's not. But my point is, it's not that it's a negative for me toward Matthew as much as it's a
No,
positive for Luke.
I don't mean it to be a negative, but what you just said encapsulates exactly my thinking. Is that Luke is intentionally including it.
Right.
Matthew has, if he was there, and we have no reason to think he wasn't there when Jesus was in the synagogue, but Matthew's inclination is not to poke his fellow Jews in the eye.
Of course,
That's not his natural way of doing it.
Gentile focus is so necessary because the early church was seen as a Jewish sect. To break it out of that, it has to be
Intentional.
Hold
on, stop. Because I had this thought and then I forgot it in all the interim.
And I brought it back.
Luke is writing probably in the mid-60s. I believe he writes his gospel before 70. A lot of scholars don't believe that. They think that Luke is writing it after the fact, and he puts the prophetic words of Luke, I think it's 24, in the mouth of Jesus because he already knows it.
Because I believe the supernatural.
That's right. Jesus is aware, like we are, that the temple has already been attacked by Antiochus 160 years ago. It makes perfect sense that the Romans will attack. Jesus knows the Jews. They're hotheads. They won't calm down. The zealots will not stop. And eventually Rome is going to stop you. If you keep being a insurrectionist, Rome's going to stomp on you really hard. Jesus knows that. It doesn't take the wisdom of God or prophecy to know that. It's already happened. Actually, it's already happened twice. You know, it happened before the exile. And then it happened by the Seleucids. So why wouldn't the Romans do it? That's what Rome does. If you resist them, they're going to stomp on your head. So, Luke is writing in the 60s, late 60s. The church has already moved away from Jewishness. Yeah. Paul, he has traveled with Paul. He's seen that the Gentiles are coming to Christ. It's already becoming not a Jewish.
It's probably mostly Gentile at this point. Maybe?
Well,
close.
The further west you go, the more Gentile Jesus is to be. And yet Jesus doesn't go along with the Pharisees at all. It's not just the Pharisees. Jesus doesn't go along with the Zealots. Jesus is his own man. He's doing his own thing. John the Baptist isn't happy with him. And Jesus doesn't care. His mission is different. And I don't believe what Luke's doing is against Jews. Right. It's for Romans or Gentiles. That's what his purpose is. Matthew's purpose is not, I want to hide these Gentile things. Matthew is thinking like a Jew of the first century, and like I'm an American and I can't help that. And it's not wrong or bad that I'm an American. It's not wrong or bad that Matthew is writing from a Jewish perspective. That's who he was. Yeah. But Luke is not. And so in my mind on Thursday morning, I'm going, holy cow, I've never seen this. It's the meta message of Luke. Luke is so desirous that the Romans will give Jesus a chance. I believe if and I haven't worked in Matthew enough, so I'm not in any way thinking that I know. But my initial thought is that Matthew's meta message, because I've never even thought about it. Okay, I've never done this. Right. But I think Matthew's meta message is probably, let me show you, fellow Jew, that this man was proprophesied. Right. We should have seen it happen. Right, and he's constantly quoting Old Testament out of context, I might add. Matthew's constantly quoting out of context the laws of the Old Testament to prove his point. Mm-hmm. Now, it's okay. It's out of context for us. Yeah. But in his world, it was perfectly legitimate to do that. Okay. You know, I don't mean that as a negative, but it is important that we realize that, I think. Because how many people do I know talk about all the prophecies that Jesus fulfilled, and when I go read them, I'm like, okay, well, that wasn't really a prophecy about the Messiah. I mean, Matthew made it into that. Right. And for his purpose, that was okay. His purpose was to say, we've missed it. Mm-hmm. And they did miss it. Mm-hmm. They thought they knew the scriptures, and they missed the Messiah. Right. Can you really?
Missed the point of the scripture.
Yeah. But it's because the way God operates, man. If you build a box and you want God in it, he's going to smash that box. Right. He's going to say, I'm not living in your box. Sorry. And that's my thing about apocalyptic. Now we're back to the end of the world. If they miss the Messiah, why do we think we can figure out by reading Revelation and Daniel, we can figure out when Jesus is coming back and how it's going to look? I think that's all bogus. I think he's going to throw us a curveball big time, or a knuckleball, and we're going to whiff at it. You know, I can't believe that we can figure out how the apocalypse is going to happen when we missed the Messiah, for crying out loud. So, all right, let me move on because I'm not even done. I'm not even close to being done. Okay. No, don't apologize. I think it's all been good, but I'm reading from my notes. Takes us back. Once I started seeing all of these things, now I'm about Friday morning, maybe Thursday, but Friday morning probably. Once I started seeing all of this, I thought to myself, I need to read Matthew's version more closely. That was my thought. I need to figure out what in the world Matthew's thinking. Why didn't he add this? And is there something I've missed? Look, if I can tell you anything to encourage you, I think I'm a good exegeter. but I also know that I miss stuff constantly. Stuff goes by me. I read the text and then I read it again and then I read it the 10th time and I go, man, why are you so stupid? It was right there in front of you. But that's what we were just talking about. They missed the Messiah, you know. So I thought to myself, I need to read Matthew again. I think there's something there that I'm missing. So I go back and I read the same story in Matthew, which is in chapter 13. And he has a bunch of parables that precede Jesus in that going to Nazareth. And I kind of saw that as Matthew's point was he just wanted the parables in there. He just wants the people to hear the teachings of Jesus because they're profound. You know, I didn't feel like it had anything to do with him going to Nazareth. Okay, that was my thought. And then I thought to myself, what's the context in Matthew? When does Matthew have Jesus going to Nazareth? What happens right before that? Not the parables, because those could be told anywhere in any moment, right? The parables, in a way, I'm going to argue, you know, Matthew, Mark, and Luke present Jesus in something like a chronological story. That's why we call it the synoptics. They are synopsis. They are a quick history of what Jesus did. But if you try to make it chronological, you're going to miss stuff because none of them have it chronologically.
They're organizing information in a
yeah,
different way.
It doesn't matter. You know what I mean? I'm not saying that they screwed up. It doesn't. In honesty, it doesn't really matter what the chronology is. And so when you're talking about parables, it doesn't matter where Jesus. Well, unless they specifically tell you where he is, then you need to pay attention. But Matthew doesn't seem to do that, and so that's all in my head. And so I look back to the end of chapter 12 of Matthew's gospel. Because prior to him taking Jesus to Nazareth in the synagogue, he gives the story of Mary and the brothers of Jesus coming to see Jesus. So I want to read that. That's your next slide. We finally get back to the notes. Verse 46, Matthew chapter 12. While Jesus was still talking to the crowd, his mother and brothers came to see him. Someone told him, "Hey, Jesus, your mother and brothers are standing outside wanting to speak with you." And he replied, "Who is my mother? And who are my brothers?" And pointing to the disciples, he said, "Here are my mother and my brothers. For whosoever does the will of my Father in heaven is my brother and is my sister and is my mother." Now you need to know that occurrence in Matthew 12 appears to be in Capernaum. Well, Al, how do you know that? Well, I didn't know that when I read it right here. But I kept reading. If you start chapter 13, it says that same day, right after Mary and the brothers come to see him. Chapter 13, verse 1. That same day, Jesus went out of the house and sat by the lake. What lake? There is no lake near Nazareth to speak of. Such large crowds gathered around him that he got into a boat. And Jesus preaches using a bunch of parables. And then in verse 53, the text reads, when Jesus had finished these parables, he moved on from there. Verse 54, coming to his hometown, he began teaching the people in the synagogues. He was in Capernaum when his family came to visit him. He wasn't in Nazareth. What does that tell you? I mean, to me, that tells me that his family doesn't live in Nazareth anymore. They live in Capernaum. That makes perfect.
How far away is that between the two?
Probably 20 miles a day. You could walk it in a day if you got after it. You could walk about 15 miles. A normal person can walk about 15 miles a day without hurting, you know. And
is it impossible to say that they didn't visit him yet from another place?
Is it possible they came to get him and that's why he went back?
Those are all great questions.
Keep moving with your thoughts. That's fine.
Then Matthew gives his story of Jesus speaking in the synagogue of Nazareth.
Right.
Let's get back, I'm reading right from my notes. Let's get back to Jesus seemingly dismissing his family. Some would argue, well, Jesus isn't really dismissing his family. He's making the point that his followers are his family. Jesus does often speak hyperbolically. You know, you have to hate your father and mother to be my disciple. Well, we all know he doesn't really mean you got to hate your parents. He wouldn't have said that. So is he really dismissing his family? Well, now I'm going to take you back to Nazareth. This is how I thought through everything. I mean, this is how my mind was working. Well, Nazareth is a tiny little village. Scholars believe there were only about 400 people living in Nazareth at the time when Jesus arrived there in the first century. So I have already, in my mind, concluded that Jesus does not live in Nazareth. He lives in Capernaum. I've already come to that from the mapping that I showed you. Okay, so in my mind, I'm thinking, no, I don't believe his family lives in Nazareth. So in my mind, I'm thinking that Jesus is not, or that his family lives in Capernaum. When he goes to the synagogue in Nazareth, probably 30 to 40% of the people who show up are extended family. That's what cousins, second cousins. In I believe it's Matthew's version, the people in Nazareth name the brothers of Jesus.
It is, Matthew.
Is it? Read it. Read the text, because I don't have it written down.
Isn't his mother's name Mary, and aren't his brothers James, Joseph, Simon, and Judas?
Slow down.
Okay. Isn't his mother's name Mary, and aren't his brothers James, Joseph, Simon, and Judas? Aren't all his sisters with us? Where then did this man get?
You guys got that? They name his brothers, and then they say, aren't his sisters with us? The implication is the brothers are not with us, but the sisters are. Doesn't that make perfect sense? The sisters get married, and they're going to live with their husbands wherever their husbands are, and they grew up, they started their lives in Nazareth. The apparent, to me, when I read that, the implication is that they don't live in Nazareth. Only the sisters remain in Nazareth. But the point is, when Jesus goes to the synagogue, these are extended family, not his brothers and sisters. But the people in Nazareth know his family. They know the names of his brothers. Do you know this is the only time in the gospel material, in fact, it's the only time anywhere in the Bible where the brothers of Jesus are named. Did you know that? There are several incidents in the Gospels that when you take them all and put them together, you come up with the conclusion that the siblings of Jesus are not accepting of his ministry. Okay, one is the story we just read where Jesus says a prophet is not without honor except in his own country or in his own hometown. Another one is that there is no indication in any of the gospel material that any of his siblings are ever there with him, ever. The only occurrence is when they come to see him and he dismisses them. And that is an indication that they're not following him, that he doesn't welcome them into the room. I mean, he basically says, when he says, these are my brothers and my mother, what is that? The implication is, and they are not. Now, he doesn't say that. But from all the other verses that we bring together, that's the implication, that his brothers...
And he also said, those who do the will of my Father are my brothers. So he's making that point. Yeah?
That's
so
right.
Also his mother was not believing him?
That's the only exception. We know his mother followed him. But we know that. That's clear that his mother is following him. Because the next thing I was going to say is, there is no one with his mother. None of his brothers or sisters at the crucifixion. That's highly unusual that his sisters wouldn't be there. Now there's an aunt and there's a cousin, but none of his brothers or sisters are there when he dies. After the resurrection in the book of Acts, the brother of James is suddenly presented in chapter 15 as the leader of the church in Jerusalem. And scholars are like, whoa, where did he come from? I mean, James, we don't have James following Jesus anywhere. And then all of a sudden he's the leader of the church in Jerusalem. How does that happen? Well, in 1 Corinthians 15, Paul tells us that Jesus appeared to his brother James in a vision, just like he appeared to Paul. And I think I mentioned it last night. I believe James went back to his siblings and went, okay, I got news for you. Our brother is the Son of God, okay? He is the Messiah. Now, why would James not follow his brother Jesus? We happen to know, not from the Bible, but from the writings of Papias and Exegesis, two men from the late 1st century, early 2nd century. And again, I mentioned last night, Papias knew John the Apostle and knew men who knew Jesus. In those fragments, we are told that James, the brother of Jesus, was a strict follower of the law. That is why he doesn't follow his brother. His brother is offensive to him because Jesus is not following the law. Nothing like the Pharisees want, and he breaks Mosaic law, but we have been taught that, oh no, he lived under the law. I mean, he says the law will not a jot or tittle will go away, you know. And I do believe he says that. He follows the law, but he doesn't follow it like they are following it. And anytime he breaks their law and they question him, he turns the law to see an angle that no one's ever thought of. His brother James doesn't like that at all. James thinks his brother is probably a nut job. I mean, what does Jesus say everybody complains about him? He's a drunkard and a glutton. He hangs around with sinners and tax collectors. That's the view of Jesus. I believe that was the view of his brother, James. And I believe everybody followed James. And I think once James gets a vision of Jesus, he goes back to his siblings and they all come to Christ. The siblings of Jesus don't follow Jesus until after the resurrection. Right. That is what we feel very certain of. And so,
and they, we talked about this, the interns and I did, about a week ago, maybe, and a half ago. But the book of James and Judas, just right out the gate, they say, I'm a bondservant, which is essentially saying, I'm a slave of Jesus. That's what they're saying.
Wait, who says that?
James, the book of James.
Okay.
And the book of Judas.
Okay, interesting.
And they said that right out the gate, I'm a bondservant.
Interesting.
They're the brother, right?
And why,
who wants to say to their brother, I'll be your servant?
There
right?
you go.
But
the implication there is a humility factor, don't you think?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I was wrong.
Yeah.
And I don't believe Jesus rubbed their face in it at all. I think he was very gracious with them, you know. Yeah. They were doing what they knew to do. I mean, James was doing his best, just like Paul was, right? So I'm at the end of my exegesis, and the rest of what I said about the brothers of Jesus doesn't really matter, but I thought to myself, this is my notes, Craig. Could it be that the family of Jesus came to urge him to go and visit Nazareth? Could it be, from Matthew's context, that his family came to him and said, and wanted to tell Jesus, or maybe they did tell him, and it's just not recorded, you need to go to Nazareth and visit the hometown? I don't know, but that's a question in my mind. That seems to be the context of Matthew's version of the story. I think it's quite possible that Jesus fully knows that James is not happy with him. And I think he knows that his siblings are probably following James's lead, because that's the Jewish norm. Jesus is not in the norm. In fact, everything he does is against the norm. You know, one of the things the Chosen did, I didn't like it at first, was the emphasis on having Mary Magdalene traveling with them and just the women around. And I didn't like it. And I thought that's just not accurate. And the more I thought, the more I read the gospel material, the more I started going, you know what? Jesus breaks all the rules. He lets women touch him. He lets women kiss him. I mean, he does everything against the religious order. And I think he does it on purpose. I think Jesus was a little bit,
Provocateur.
yes.
A rebel.
I mean,
No,
look,
he
he's
was a
a,
rebel.
well, no, he's not a rebel, but he's the son of God. And it's kind of like, I'm here to do something new and different. That's why I quoted the text last night. He tells the Pharisees, you don't put new wine in an old wineskin. The new wine is me and the way I'm doing things. The old wineskin is you. And your whole construct that you've built is out of date, baby. It's old. And you know what? That's the first time in the New Testament, if we take chronologically, it's the first time in the New Testament that the words new and old are used, that we refer to Old Covenant, Old Testament, New Covenant, New Testament. So,
It's really ringing a bell with me.
Dutch.
so I believe the whole intention is that Jesus is, I believe the whole intention of this story is twofold. One, Luke wants it known that to the Roman audience that Jesus didn't come just for Jews, he came for Romans. He came for non-Jews. But I think there's a second thing going on. I believe that Jesus goes to Nazareth to confront the attitudes that they have towards him. I think Jesus takes it on. I think he takes it head on. That's how I'm reading it now. In Matthew's version of the text, it says the people took offense at him. Verse 58, Jesus did not do many miracles there because of their lack of faith. Did what? We tend to think when someone says their lack of faith, oh, they didn't believe he could heal. No. Their lack of faith was, you ain't the Messiah, pal. That's why he says the scriptures, today in your hearing, this scripture is fulfilled. Did he think they were going to like that? I don't think so. I think Jesus knew they weren't going to like it, and he didn't care.
Well,
I'm here.
Tell them the truth.
I'm here. I'm Messiah. Get used to it. It's not going to change. I think it was a direct confrontation. So, okay, there you go. That is.
What was your hermeneutic, real quick? Do you have some summary?
You would ask that, wouldn't you? Okay.
Seems important.
Well, you know what? I have in my notes. If I just followed my notes, I'd be good. Instead, I have to get off on tangents. So I have it in my notes to ask you, how do we apply this? What is the hermeneutic? What did I go to my church on Sunday and tell them? We didn't spend anywhere near this amount of minutes on the exegesis, man. I flew through it, and I promise you most of the people out there were going, but I wanted to expose them anyway. But I'm asking you guys, because we've spent a ton of time now, what's the application here? What is God saying to us? And what is the text saying to our students?
So I'm trying to look just at the Luke text and not get too much from the Matthew text. But obviously it's real clear that he's saying that I am the Messiah, right? And so then, of course, for a Christian church, you'd be like, well, we already believe that, right? But I think this idea where it's like, physician, heal yourself, or do that here, it's kind of like, well, God, I need you to do something for me right now, so that to kind of show yourself to me, I know you're faithful, but I need you to show me that you're faithful, kind of thing, right? And so if we're not careful, we can, try to want to twist God's arm, or not be okay with things with us not getting what we want from Jesus,
Self-centered.
right? Like it's like, well, God, I need you to do something for me. And Jesus is like, you know what? And I'll give you an example. I remember we were talking to a couple, and they had spent some time overseas, or they were some ministry, they did something, and they said, we hadn't really figured out, what the Lord was doing in our life during that point, or during that season. I was like, well, maybe it wasn't about your life at all. Maybe it was about the people that were around you. Maybe it wasn't about you at all. I never thought of that, right? Because we're just naturally so programmed to think about everything through our own lens, and that's not evil. It's human.
It's ego,
right? But to think that God would use our lives for no benefit of our own, but for the benefit of others. Well,
That's
golly,
good.
I came to be not be served, but to serve and
That's
give my life
good.
as a ransom for
That's
many.
good,
You know?
yeah.
So I mean, that's the thing. We this box. It's like you got to be doing something for me, or you're not really it. You know.
Yeah.
So I
That's
don't know.
good. Yeah, go.
Okay, this is probably not right, but
Whoa.
Don't start that way.
There's no right or wrong here. Really?
Well, there could be wrong. I'm just
Well, there could be, but you know what? You know, in my church, I don't know if you remember it, but oftentimes after I preach, I ask the congregation, "What did God say to you?" It's amazing to me how people in my church will say things about the message I just spoke and what it means, and I'm like, oh, that is really awesome. Why didn't I think of that? I've been thinking about this all week and I didn't think of that. So it's never, I just think there's always a good thing that you think. And I always tell my church, I do that because if you have this thought that God revealed this to you, then there's probably 2 or 3 other people who need to hear that. So go. Don't say, what'd she say? It's probably not right. Yeah, don't say that.
well, I just think it's a little simplistic. That's all.
That's okay.
But to me, I think it's a call to obedience. And Jesus is saying, "This is who I am. Come and follow me." Yeah. Like,
No, I agree.
if you want to be my brother or my sister, like, you know, be obedient to the will of my Father. You know?
He's giving them a chance.
Yeah. And Jesus only did the will of his Father. You know.
Tim.
Now we can't do it like he did it.
Right.
I mean, we would like to think we can, but we can't. We got to try though. So that's what I quit long ago. I quit saying, God, I'm doing my best, because I know I'm not. So now I say, when I'm before God, I say, God, I'm trying to do my best. I'm trying to do my best. And even that, I know I don't always try to do my best. So, but we got to do that's right. We just can't quit trying. Right? We can't quit pressing on. Anybody else? What's the application?
I keep thinking about, like, the kingdom is more important than comfort. Like, it bothers me that he hurt their feelings. I'm like, that's kind of rude, Jesus. Like,
That's some of that edgy Jesus.
Feeler.
no, but like when we speak, when we share about Jesus, we're very concerned about,
Right.
oh, we're gonna push them away, they're gonna get upset. And he's like, this is bigger than that, and it's worth it for me to make you feel uncomfortable.
Mine's kind of on that. Mine was just like, I'm going to make waves. I'm going to do something different. Like you were saying, he broke the law in such a way that he was following it, but it turned it on its head.
Yes.
And so, come with me, I'm going to show you how to do it right. Like, I'm not just doing it to be rebellious and edgy, but I'm doing it because, like you said, this is more kingdom-minded. Yeah. This is not as important. Let's just do it.
Go and learn the meaning of this saying.
Yeah.
I desire
mercy, not sacrifice.
Yeah.
Wow. I get chill bumps every time.
Yeah.
Every time he says it in The Chosen, it's so powerful.
So I have a perspective that nobody else, with the exception of maybe April, has. So it's in there again. So part of this is we are reading into the scripture, right? Not to the detriment of the scripture as we exegete, right? We're trying to. So Al, by personality, is more confrontational than, say, me. 100% times more than April, for instance, right? So, yeah.
You think I still am?
Well, I mean, this is your I mean, God's not trying to change your personality.
Am I any different though than when I was?
Oh, I'm sure you are.
I hope so.
Yeah.
I sure hope so.
But my point is, but I'm just saying.
As a negative.
No, it's not a negative.
I know.
But some people will never have a difficult conversation because they're gripped with the fear of confrontation.
Yeah.
Yes.
That is not. Talk to any of Al's interns through years. That was not a problem for Al, right? Am I wrong?
You're not wrong.
Okay, all right. So my point is, so someone with
I don't do it to my wife very often, though. I can tell you that right now.
But my point is, so because he's wired that way, it's also easy to read that in and not be wrong. By the way, right? To see he has a natural filter that way.
To see.
Whereas she's Mama Bear. right?
Yeah.
And so she's not seeking, she's not thinking, oh, there's a problem here. I got to confront this problem
And
as
you're,
a natural wild.
so you're saying that I naturally see that he's confronting.
100%. And
Okay.
it's not wrong.
No. The only reason I'd argue against that is I did not approach the text like that at all.
Right.
It opened up to me. I never thought that.
Well, I would say the same way you think about Matthew's background.
There you go. That's good. Touche. That's good.
It's not that
I can't help
you can't
it.
help it.
Exactly.
It's who you are.
It's just
That's my point. It's who you are.
No,
and it
that's-
doesn't make it wrong. Jesus is very have you guys not heard me talk about the fact that Jesus is not always fuzzy and cuddly?
Yeah.
That's
Right?
true.
And people, when they think that all the time, that it's out of balance. And to think he's always fiery and always confrontational is also out of balance, right? But part of it is he's speaking truth. And so if you think something that's wrong, he's going to tell you the truth.
Yeah.
And he probably was perturbed. Listen, you know what your gospel says? He said to the disciples after the resurrection, he rebuked them. For their stubborn refusal to believe. That's strong language. That the writer would write that he rebuked them for their stubborn refusal to believe.
That he was
It
raised.
means that he was not happy.
That he was raised.
Yeah, they didn't believe. Yeah, and so like, how do you come to write that down? Like, what did Jesus do, and how did he communicate that caused the writer to write those words? He wasn't like, "Oh, bless your heart." He
Yeah.
didn't say,
All right. Let me read what I told the church.
Between my toes.
Okay. Here's my hermeneutic to my church. Many of us find that our families or friends that we grew up with are not quick to listen to our story of faith.
I was going to go here too.
I think this was the case with Jesus, so we should not be surprised when it happens to us. Boy, I hate to read this next sentence.
It's inspired.
I know I was very, all caps, aggressive with my family and friends after I was first saved. I was very aggressive. I was confrontational. That's my nature.
You're wiring.
It would have been better for me to simply live out my faith for a couple of years rather than being perhaps overly aggressive with telling them about my faith. Sometimes we have to earn the right to be heard. I led a ton of people to Christ my first 3 years as a believer. But most of them had never met me. Why is that so funny?
I don't know.
But my family, I turned them off. Especially to my dad, my stepfather who just passed recently. Especially to him. And I remember when I went to him and told him how sorry I was, our relationship turned. So many of my close friends and family didn't want to hear it from me. And of course, then I got the martyrs. I'm such a servant of God that nobody wants to be around me. Really? That's not what they said about Jesus. They said he was always around sinners and tax collectors. He had to be merciful or they wouldn't have wanted to be around him. He wasn't like I was, right? Some of them have come to faith, my close friends and family, but I suspect I could have been more effective if I had been less talk and more action. Jesus eventually reveals himself, and that's an amazing thing if you think about it. And I do believe what I'm going to tell you. And then this is the view of most scholars, is that James did not like what Jesus was doing, and he didn't want to have anything to do with it. James was a strict observer of the law. Jesus reveals himself to his brother. How much mercy is that? He didn't come to him and scold him. He appeared to him in love and grace. And that's what we need to pray for. That God would reveal himself to those who don't seem to listen to our story. And we have to earn the right to speak and wait for the moment when God has brought people